So we're well on the way for that. That's really good. For those of you who haven't heard me before, my name's Simon Darnley. I am head of nursing and at the moment head of infection control at South London and Maudsley, the Lambeth Directorate. But my background is I am a CBT therapist of many years. I was reflecting, I do a staff story, and I was reflecting that actually I started training in 1982. Some of you weren't born then, I know. So it's a long time coming in. I'd worked in mental health as a nurse and a therapist. And I've specialised particularly in anxiety disorders, obsessional compulsive disorder, BDD, and a whole range of body-focused repetitive behaviours, as well as Tourette's as well, and things like that. And I'm hoping that this is going to be participatory. So I'm hoping that everybody is willing to chat and use the Q&A button. I think is the way you do it. There's a Q&A button at the bottom, and there's questions in there, which also I'm looking for feedback, because my presentation is about learning and coping with body-focused repetitive behaviours during the pandemic, and how's that been. But I think that actually I'm not the expert here. You're the experts with all the skills and how you've managed and how you've coped or not coped. It would be really important to share, and then we can actually look at how we can put that within the kind of framework of and what we would suggest within CBT, or approaches that we know the research has suggested can help, but also what can't help as well, what has been the case. And I don't know how you lot have found it, but I found the pandemic really difficult. I'm going to share my screen on this, and let's see if I can do this. 1 second. It's been really hard, and particularly for me, I'm quite external in the way I manage life. So I have lots of gigs and socializing and go out. If it wasn't for work, I'm sure it really would have affected my mental health. I know it's really affected my sleep. I think there's a very high percentage of us who are really having difficulty sleeping, but also kind of understanding it and what's happening and the fear. And my job as head of nursing has been very much involved in the actual pandemic. I had to wear a lot of PPE and treating people with COVID with mental health problems. I set up a COVID ward, and then we took that down because luckily at the moment we don't have anybody who are COVID positive in Lambeth Hospital at the moment, which is really good. But at one point we had up to 20, which obviously 20 people who were with COVID and mental health problems of varying types, anxiety, depression, psychosis, was actually really difficult, and how they coped with that, and then obviously with the care that they need in that sense as well. So it has kind of taken us out of things, and I want to share. This is what it's like for me, I think we said. So this is how I've found it. It's kind of, we know a known frame of reference that we know how to operate from, and we've kind of got used to that a bit. But then what's suddenly come along is something that's completely unknown to us, and we haven't got any experience on. It's a once in a generation situation that suddenly causes lots of anxiety. And if you're anything like me, the first few weeks, it was all about toilet rolls and whether it was 5Gs, all these kind of things going on. And every day for me seemed like about 5 minutes, and yet it lasted a week. So things went really quickly and yet really slow at the same time. It made me anxious, it made me irritable. It was, like I say, affecting my sleep. I missed a lot of my routines, my friends. I'm really lucky in the fact I was able to go to work between, and lucky that I could drive to work. Suddenly it was really empty, and now that's getting back to virtually normal again now. A lot of people have been furloughed, and I'd be really interested in how you have managed, how that you've managed with that situation, and had that reduced, either being alone, because we know that really affects people with body focused repetitive behavior, because it can be a real time suck. And suddenly, if you are able to have that space where you're not distracted or you're not doing things as well, then it can be on your mind quite a lot, and that can be really problems as well. So there's lots of issues. Also, people who manage with their kind of external self-care things, where they had set appointments or things that they would use to kind of help them from refraining from picking or picking the skin, things like that. I, by the way, in case anybody hasn't spoken to me before, I do have very mild form in my thumbs. I pick constantly here. In fact, this one's got quite bad now, but it actually often is bleeding. And sometimes I'm in meetings. I used to be in meetings and there'd be blood on the papers that would be there. And I'd be like, oh, crumbs, why is there, I pick so much in the meeting where I'm anxious or whatever, that suddenly there's blood on the papers I was passing around or chairing, which is always slightly embarrassing. So I do put plasters on them sometimes, but then I know that I pick them off as well. So people do that. That's one of the things we do. For people who don't know us catching up, because I know that some people who are attending are learning as well, that we know that body focused repetitive behaviours are compulsive. It's a mental health disorder that includes things like hair pulling, skin picking and nail biting. It's clear from the name that these involve repetitive, somewhat obsessional interaction with the body. And we know that they are really much more complex than just a habit in itself and is difficult to overcome. So sometimes people talking about it like an addiction, where there's this kind of slight pleasure, there's this little teeny point, and kind of entangled, and harm is entangled with the kind of satisfaction, but also the shame and the guilt as well that happens to that, knowing that so often there's repeated attempts to decrease or stop the skin picking, and it causes distress and huge impacts on life as well. And often people hide it from other people or try in that sense as well. And we just want to say it's not attributable to the effects of drugs or other medical conditions as well. That's really important to do. So the urges are often there, and they're really at kind of ease, and people try and conceal their behaviours, and kind of need to satisfy it. So I know lots of people who say they often go off sick or go home and do that as well, or they catch themselves on things like trains or driving and they suddenly find themselves picking. I once remember treating somebody who had trichotillomania, where they pull out the hair, and she was driving on the motorway and had to take both hands off the wheel to try and get that hair once she identified it, and that was really dangerous. And it was then she felt, oh, Simon, I really need to help with this. It was treatment, and my child was in the back as well. But I really felt that was it. It was so more important to actually get the hair and actually continue driving. It's common. So we know that a lot of people at some point pick skin to noticeable damage, maybe 5% of us in that sense as well. But it can get worse. And it can also lead to, once you start, it can get worse and worse over time. So it tends to gradually get worse and worse and worse as well. It's common in BDD and also common in OCD, obsessional compulsive disorder and body dysmorphic disorder. We know that roughly age-wise, it can be any age. It tends to be much more prevalent in females. And what's interesting, it's similar across cultures. So in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East as well, we know that skin picking is around there as well. So my first question, as I want to really see, because I've done a bit of talking now, this realised the timing already, is how have you been coping or not? It'd be really good for people to really share that. I've got the Q&A up, and somebody says, what are the most effective treatments for trichotillomania? I'm going to be talking about that, thank you. So we'll get to the treatments and we can say what the treatments are, if that's okay. Later on, there's some really effective treatments for trichotillomania, which we know is cognitive behaviour therapy, and habit reversal is really useful. There's lots of things that you can do in that sense as well, and I will answer those bits as well. But I'd really like, because now we have 19 of you there as well, is how have people been coping? What are the skills that people have either picked up or managed during this process? What have we got? Have we got anybody? So I'm going to give you some time to do that, to hopefully contribute. I've got the answers that I feel, but I'd really like yours. Hang on. Let's see. Anybody willing to say how they've coped or not coped, or things they found have been useful? Excellent. Breathing based mindfulness practices help me. That's a really useful thing. That's one that somebody has written. That's a very, very useful thing, that we know that mindfulness can really help you become in the moment and be aware, because awareness is the first thing. One of the anonymous questions is, what's the most effective treatment of trichotillomania? The first stage is actually increasing awareness. You can't treat what you're not aware of. And often people may find themselves picking or pulling until suddenly it's only when they've actually it's come out or it becomes really sore that happens. I know that's the case with me with my picking on my thumbs. Is often I won't really notice till it's either till the blood comes onto the sheet, onto the minutes of the meeting or whatever. I kind of automatically do that as well. Other people have said that they cope by avoiding looking in mirrors or reducing the amount of times I check in the mirror as well. For body focused repetitive behaviours, that can be useful, and it can be useful as part of the treatment, especially at the moment where people are furloughed, they're looking at mirrors all the time, and that's a short way of coping. If you also worry about, if you have body dysmorphic disorder because of that, then there's actually a need to try and face that with the body dysmorphic treatment, which is different to treatment for body focused repetitive behaviors. So that's a really good thing to do it if you have body focused repetitive behaviors, but not BDD in that sense as well. So we try to reduce the amount of times people check in the mirror, and we would then suggest covering up the mirrors, particularly if you're having to stay at home or walk all the time. You get much more time to stare at them and look, and I totally agree to cover them up or reduce the amount of times you do that. Somebody else has put having false nail extensions helped me at times. That's a really good thing. I really like that. It must be really difficult to get those false nail extensions at the moment, so you're probably missing the fact that you can't get to have them done. Some people find it useful to wear gloves initially as well, or something that actually prompts you and increases your awareness of those things. So often having, you can get a band that vibrates when it lifts up in the air. So you can be aware of when it happens, because you need to be aware of when your hands go towards the areas that you pick. Majority of the time it will be the face, it can be other parts of the body too, but the majority is around the face. It can be where you feel a little itch and then you suddenly start feeling. The other way of helping at the moment is, I would suggest, is also making sure you really have good creams as well, because we know that often people will rub and find an area that's kind of scratchy or an imperfection that wants to pick. I've got a little scratch here. I was putting in a rose the other day, and I know that that's somewhere where I may just rub my finger along, and suddenly it becomes slightly different, and I think, oh, there, and I can start picking it already as I'm going along. So trying to do that as well. So I think that's a really sensible thing to actually be aware of having the cream on as well. So you can do that as well. Somebody else, and that's really brave of them, has said, it may sound odd, but I don't think this is. I think it's a fantastic thing to do. And what they were doing is actually drawing on their own skin with skin safe pens and adult colouring in. It's a really good distraction. I can see why that would help, because it doesn't hurt your skin at all, but it's a similar piece of behaviour. There's a friend of mine, Liz Atkin, if anybody wants to look her up, she's an artist. In fact, a lot of the photographs here are hers. She's very, very open about her body focused repetitive behaviour, and she has charcoal with her, and she draws and does a lot of, Nicole's put it up as well, her link there as well. She's very open about that, and she uses charcoal on tubes, and she draws a lot, and she fiddles with it constantly, keeping her fingers going. And that's a really good distraction to do that. So actually drawing on your skin with skin safe pens and adult colouring is fantastic. It's a similar thing to that as well. In fact, you can see from the art that I put up, all the art is Liz, and she's painted her skin quite a lot for her art, and various things like that as well. Somebody else has found that they have more time to pick their skin when they do, particularly on the arms and legs, due to the heat and not being at work, which is exactly the, I can see that happening as well. And when you're not being at work, it's suddenly you can focus, and you've got the time to do that as well. So people will, it's very probable you pick more as well. So starting to wear longer dresses and hiding the scars and less able to access the skin is a really important thing. It's really important to make it difficult. There's some, I've looked at all the things that people have suggested already, and some of the things like put the devices people use, instruments, like put them in the fridge, or make them really difficult, or give them to people so it's hard to do it. It's not just available all the time, and to wear longer dresses, just to make it that extra step, to make it one sense more difficult to make, to pick allows you to increase your awareness, and that's the starting point for treatment for all of this. I often say it's like the principle of popcorn in cinemas, which hopefully we'll go back to at some point as well. I know if I buy a big popcorn and go to cinema, it can become quite mindless, and I'm picking something for it's all gone. I wasn't even hungry. Why did I eat all that popcorn? Because you're slightly distracted, you just carry on, it becomes an automatic behavior. And sometimes with body focused repetitive behaviors, the skin picking can become like that. It becomes quite soothing. So things like if people do have trichotillomania with their hair, it's making sure that hair's out the way. It doesn't tickle their face and then just triggers them to try to move it out and then start picking as well. So, and we'll look at the treatment, the effectiveness of habit reversal and awareness of that as well. But the first thing is to increase your awareness. Make sure you're aware. If you can be aware of 85% of the times where you start to go up to pick, whether it's your face or your hair or the shoulder, if you just be aware of this movement more, you can then do something about it. You can put it down, you can try and hold something, just constantly hold it, or you can actually look for that distraction as well. Another thing that's important, and thank you again, somebody who's put about a journal of self-kindness acts that you can do for yourself each day. I think it's really important. One of the big things about body focused repetitive behaviors is there isn't the definition of cure. It's always going to be an Achilles heel for you if you do have it. So we know that in times of stress or difficulties, this will be your Achilles heel. So recovery doesn't mean you won't have it forever. It's how you manage it. And therefore, if you do have a slip up and you do start picking again, it's really important not to be hard on yourself and not to be negative yourself. To forgive yourself and to be compassionate to yourself is really important. And this goes for any of those behaviors. It's constantly important. Otherwise, what tends to happen is you think, oh, I'm doing really well. I haven't picked for a few days. It's really, really good. And then you do. And then you think, oh, what was the point? And then you feel guilt and shame, and then you can just spiral out of it. It's really important to forgive yourself immediately and know that you've done really well and that you keep trying to do that. That's really important to do that as well. So often a journal of self-kindness acts is really important, but also self-statements and compassionate statements to actually allow yourself to actually say, I am worth it and I am compassionate, and it's absolutely normal and human to err and to make mistakes and to relapse again. But I know what I need to do and the steps I need to take to get back to that as well. Somebody else has said that exercising helps as well. Makes people feel more positive and healthy afterwards. Definitely, I think it's a really important thing to do that, and that's really key as well. Somebody's talked about their BDD, which says it makes them, which has got worse as well. And they say, is BDD heavily influenced by a negative environment and the life that they lead? I think that actually, of course, the way that you feel about yourself and the way that you are, we know that BDD is affected by mood. And so if you feel low or depressed, then your BDD is going to get worse as well. In the same way that often your body focused repetitive behaviors are going to get worse. That would be quite normal in some ways as well. So it's not necessarily the environment, but actually, obviously, that's what's getting you down. And once you get down, you get depressed. And once you get depressed, then all these associated, we know that OCD, BDD, and this will get worse. That's quite normal in some ways. Okay. Anybody else? That's really helpful. Thank you, people. I really appreciate that. So let's see now. Okay. Let's share my screen again. There you go. This is Liz and one of her pictures of herself, as you can see, and how she sees herself. Her art is all about her body focused repetitive behaviors as well. So, but also I wanted to know how you lot were coping, of course, with the fact that with COVID, one of the advice has been not to touch your face. And that can be really difficult in that. So hang on, you're telling me not to touch my face. The average person touches their face maybe 200 times a day, but people with body focused repetitive behaviors can be up to 2,000 times a day. So it can be much, much more, where people are aware of that as well. So the kind of cartoon about it's for your own good, where now the tables have turned on dogs as well. And but there's a principle about that of actually how do we get to stop doing it as well? How do we manage that and look for that? But in the times of COVID as well, it's actually managing the fear, stress, and anxiety as well, and how we cope with that process. And particularly, as we've already said from some people, where they're alone, is actually managing in isolation, because we know that when you're alone, people often tend to pick more, but and actually staying in one place, whereas they view often it's a private behaviour that a lot of people won't do in public as well. It'd be really unlikely that people pick your skin or pull your hair in front of other people in public. It's really going to often be somewhere you're alone or watching TV, where there's a lot less social control, where there's fewer people around and things like that as well. And we know that can make it much, much worse. And as we said about the triggers at home, whether it's the mirrors or seeing things like that as well, and just having the time as well to pick and to do that as well. So it's really important to be aware that it's normal. It's completely normal to feel sad, stressed, confused, scared, and angry, especially during this COVID crisis. It's a huge thing that's been put on all of us. Routine is I would suggest one of the biggest things that I'm going to be saying, and one of the key points that I'd really like people to take away is actually, we know routine is really, really important. There's this brilliant piece of research about, if you join the army, the making your bed in the morning sets you up. There's lots of research, actually that's a really important thing, actually making your bed and having to do that task, and making the bed and doing that. That's why they make that in the army. And the routine is really an issue about getting up, doing those things and doing that. I think this is really important for people who are particularly furloughed or not working regularly at the moment, or not all their lives have been changed by the amount so they can go out and do things as well, is to put in a routine. We put in routines for people who are depressed and unable to go out, even if it means they have to get up, get dressed, and at that point was go to a library or go to a shop or go to a coffee shop. Now we can't do that. Getting up at a similar time, having that routine, even though you don't have to, making the effort to get dressed, making the effort to do that bit of exercise or whatever, and having that routine is important. Don't let it just drift until you're in your gym jams at 7 o'clock in the evening. The routine is so important for your health, but also can really help with the body focused repetitive behaviors. Diet, sleep, exercise, and social contacts go without saying. Sleep has been difficult for a lot of us, and it's really important, but I think that we really need to make sure that we have that. There are a lot of good sleep hygiene exercises around for doing that as well, making sure we, again, as part of routine, making sure you go to sleep at the same time, getting up at the same time, and that shouldn't vary more than an hour at weekends even as well, and that's really important. Also limiting the amount of time. I'm quite glad that the daily briefings have stopped, because at one point I was a bit obsessed with them, and I realized it was getting me down a bit just watching them. So in some ways I'm quite glad they are. And it was, especially in the beginning, I don't know, there has been a change, I think, but definitely the first 2 months or so, it was all over the face and very, very negative. It does seem the fear slightly has gone down a bit. I don't know if people agree with me with that, but in some ways we know that we're expecting a second wave as well. So the other point I wanted to make, and I'm running them as well, is that mental health services are open. I did a talk recently for a whole load of service users in the Maudsley, and some of them were really surprised to think that we were still supporting people. IAP services are open, psychological therapy services are open. They're often delivering it differently by using Zoom, but we are actually even doing some face-to-face and looking for how we can work with that. So it's really important to get the support if you need it as well. And then finding out what works for you is really important. We know people are really individualistic on the ways that they cope and manage things. So we said about face touching and trying to prevent that. That's really important. But also the key messages, which I'm going to go, is reducing and getting yourself to stop. There are 3 things. 1 is increasing your self-awareness. 2 is reducing the triggers that you know that trigger you to do that. And then 3 is the substituting the behaviours that you would do for, let's say, the trichotillomania or skin picking for something different. And what's brilliant is some of the suggestions that you've already suggested hits one of those three things: either increasing your self-awareness for when it happens, reducing the triggers, whether it's covering up the mirrors, making sure that you avoid certain things and doing those bits as well, like even nails, things like that as well, or substituting behaviours. The drawing is a substitute behaviour. That's absolutely fine. And that really helps you reduce and get yourself to stop on these three things as well. Let's have a look. Okay, this is another piece of art by Liz as well. As you can see, she actually literally paints on herself on her skin here for this one, which I think is a lovely. This is it. I've got this painting in my she photographs it and puts it on wood, and they're really lovely. And I've got this in my office as well. I'm going to stop there and look at some of the other practical steps as well, because I'll see what we've got. Okay. Oh, so in the webinar chat is the Keene Smart Vibrating Wristband. How brilliant. You put that up. Thank you for that. I was aware of it, but then there's a link there to how to get one, which is brilliant. That vibrating wristband will help you vibrate. So when it moves, you can tell. And that can hopefully allow you to be aware. Oh, it's vibrating, hands down, and be aware of not getting up to the to pick as well, or to pull the hair as well, which is really, really good. Brilliant. As well. So the Keene Bracelet, thank you very much. That's really helpful. That's really, really good. Somebody else has said that some research has found a genetic cause in these cases. Do you think there can be improvement or remission? Okay, really interesting. I don't think there's been research to suggest a genetic cause, but there's a genetic aspect of it. Now, that's quite a lot of things have a genetic aspect, but it doesn't. Of course, there can be an improvement and remission in that case as well. Just because somebody has a genetic aspect of their mental health problem doesn't mean that there can't be an improvement, and it doesn't mean that can't be cured. A good example is psychosis. We know that cognitive behavior therapy for psychosis is really, really effective and can really help a lot of people with really psychotic episodes, or what people often call schizophrenia, things like that as well, is really, really helpful. We know that there is some small evidence that obsessive compulsive disorder has a genetic aspect to it as well. But we also know is that the genetic aspect is only one aspect. There's the environmental aspect and the behavioral aspect, and the cognitive or the thought aspect is a really important part as well. Just because somebody has a genetic part of the problem doesn't make it purely a genetic problem, and that's really important to say. And so of course there can be a problem, of course there can be a cure. People can actually get right back to a really good quality of life, and there can be improvement, and there can be a real remission as well. Somebody else has said that lockdown has been a massive relief, as I was worried about catching COVID and passing it on, given how much I touch my skin. What recommendations do you have for coming out of lockdown, as I want to be sensible yet don't engage in avoidance? Oh, that's such a brilliant question, and really, really brave to say that you want to be sensible and yet don't engage in avoidance. I think whoever you are, you need to take it slowly, and you need to take it in your own time, and it's a kind of graded, the approach is a graded bravery of actually saying, okay, I'm going to take this risk, and I'm going to take this next one. I know that I'm going to do that in a sensible way, and I'm going to take the risk. I know that it's going to make you feel anxious, it's going to make you feel worried, but you need to do that because you need to get back to a quality of life of living the way you want to live it, and that's a really important thing. But that's a really good question. So my recommendations for coming out of lockdown is, I totally agree that to be sensible and be aware of the avoidances and start to face them in a graded, brave way, and say, where can I start with that? Okay, I'm willing to first of all go and walk where there's more people, and then maybe that's walk to there. Maybe I'm going to go and get a coffee now, or I'm going to go to yesterday I went for a walk in Greenwich for the first time in since the lockdown, and there was a pub open that was selling beer outside, so we're able to line up, it wasn't very long, and get beer outside. It was really, really amazing to do that suddenly after these years as well. But something you think, okay, I can take that risk, and actually have that and take that risk. So graded bravery is my answer to that, in managing that. But that's a lovely question, thank you for that one as well. Let's go for some of the things I felt some practical tips on. So I'm going to share. Woo. Am I sharing that at the moment? I'm going to ask somebody if I am. I'll share screen, sorry. Share, okay. Hopefully, that's it. Thank you very much, Nicole, you've been brilliant. So I'm going to just share on here. So you can see that, in fact, these are the things I think are really important. And that is to take practical steps that you can actually do. So cover your mirrors. If you use kind of tools, put them in the freezer or something like that. You don't have to throw them away, but you want to make things much more difficult for yourself. Create barriers. If you know where hot spots are, then wear them, whether it's long sleeves or like people wearing longer dresses, anything that makes it slightly difficulty as well. So gloves are helpful, and that's going to be hard in the heat, and that, but that'll be gone by the weekend. It'll be raining and cold again next week. But making that daily plan and routine is to increase your awareness, make it difficult, have that self-compassion, and make sure that you do connect as well as you feel, whether it's connect to others or connect to yourself is really important as well in that bit. Form new habits. That's the idea. Even though it's much more complex than just a habit, it's really important to kind of form new things that can give you things. So sensory tools like stress balls, or I know somebody who used bubble wrap, but that was quite helpful as well. I had a fidget spinner to try and stop my thumb, but I actually broke it because I used it too much. So I had to stop that one as well. So this is a time where you can use lots of distractions as well. There's a doctor in America who can suggest about the pressure point in the webbing to relieve anxiety, but forces a hand away from the face. So actually kind of pushing in there to keep it away. The skin in your cheeks can be an easy target. So actually trying to make sure you've got cream on there. So otherwise, if it starts to get dry, you can start to feel and then just pick and those bits as well. So it's actually trying to make sure that you have good skincare as well, and the possibility of using gloves. Some of the other things people have found useful is to increase self-awareness, is to stop. And that's where the mindfulness comes in, and just be completely aware of yourself. We know, and do that for maybe 5 minutes, just be aware. Post-it notes on areas where you think, actually, that's an area which I know that I'm much more likely to do that. So stick them around the house, or reminders on your smartphone to check where your hands are at that moment as well. Plasters can be helpful to cover those bits as well. We've said about the bracelet as well, to anything that reduces temptation, putting the hair away from the face, exercise, the kind of fidget spinners or fiddling is really good as well in those things as well. That's really, really important to do those bits as well. Often I've given advice to lots of children where they may actually do, okay, there's lots of messy play and mud and paint and oil and things like that as well. It's really important to do those bits as well. There are challenges in getting the treatment. We know that there's limited public and professional awareness of BDD, body-focused repetitive behaviours, and there's a lot of embarrassment and shame, and often it can be diagnosed wrongly as OCD or BDD, and often GPs minimise the severity and impact. They think that skin picking is just a small thing like nail biting, but they don't realise that even that can be very severe when it's bleeding or difficulty in those things as well. So there is limited treatment available, and it's quite hard. But you can pursue that. I know that through the BDD Foundation, through the OCD Action, you can advocate to try and actually, I think I've supported both those in actually putting up webinars on the OCD Action one as well. It's okay to do that as well, to actually look at actually getting treatment and what you would need to do. I know somebody asked about the treatment. So what is the treatment that we'd do for this? I'm going to go to self-monitoring. So we said about the importance of self-monitoring, about looking what happens just before I start to pick. If we're going for somebody asked about what's the treatment for trichotillomania, which is kind of hair pulling as well, is what's happened just before that? What was I doing? It's often really good to actually make a diary. If you can record, like I say, 85% of the times where you do pull the hair out, you will suddenly find, if you did that for 2 weeks, I will be amazed if it hasn't reduced by about 75% just by actually self-monitoring. It is really impressive because you become aware. So have a baseline of the date, the time, the situation, the thoughts, and the strength of urge that you've had to pull that hair, and then the consequences. If you did pull that hair out and you did feel that, what was the consequences where you think, oh no, I felt really guilty and I felt really shame there, and now I've got a bowl patch catching on my head that's occurring there as well. But we know if you can self-monitor 2 weeks and you catch about 85% of the times where you do pick or grab that, it will reduce. And it's amazing. And I often really look forward to seeing people come back after 2 weeks and they go, oh my God, Simon, it's amazing. I really did what you said. I did it for 2 weeks and I've reduced it. It's a really good start. And then it kicks off the rest of treatment as well. Some people use really inventive ways to do that self-monitoring. They can have Excel sheets and they kind of make it like somebody who was working in an office, and they use an Excel sheet and they put up next to their work one, and they could just press a button and it would just go up, and then press a button and it would go away again. And they had these beautiful Excel sheets about their baseline of each time they felt the urge to pull a hair and manage it as well. And then when they came back, we graphed it out easily and it went straight down. And then you say, okay, now you're doing that, how are we going to keep that going? And the key thing is something called the reversal approach. And that is that we know that the behaviors that happen become ingrained, it becomes automatic. It's very similar to, I always use similar to David Beckham taking that free kick. He took a free kick against Greece in the Euros, where he took it and it went straight in the goal like that. Now, it was a one-off 5-second piece of behavior, but what I do know is he practiced for hour after hour after hour, and he had muscle memory. So he had muscle memory for that kick, where to kick it, where to actually kick that ball, put the right spin on it to go into the goal. And his muscles, if you like, had learnt that piece of behavior because he'd done it over and over. So with body-focused repetitive behaviors, the very nature of them as being repetitive behaviors is that we do the same thing over and over. So I do this over and over. I've done this since I was about 6, constantly. And so I know that this is my natural repetitive behavior. For some people, it may be the thumb here, and some people it may be twirling. We've done that. You've built up a muscle memory of that process that's been there for some time. So what you need to do is to undo that muscle memory. So you need an alternative opposite movement. So you look for it and try and maintain it for a minute so it doesn't look odd. It can be compatible with life in that sense. So if we're trying to reduce this behavior, you can see here as a friend of mine, Linda, posing, she's trying to reduce that behavior. And so that's where she's the behavior she's trying to do. As you can see, she's picking, or this one. The opposite movement for that would be this. See the hands open, you can see wide, but also away from her body in that sense as well. Now that doesn't look too odd. You can do that in the office in some ways as well. So you could do it like this in the office, just hold it there as well. So as soon as you see yourself there picking, then you would put it away and the hand open, trying to get on the screen, and you would be able to put it away, your hand right away and open as well. And if you can hold that for 30 seconds, then that's really, really good as well. You can see that in fact you will be able to quite soon get control of it. Not all the time. If you get, like I say, if you get depressed or there's life events happening, it's like to be your Achilles heel, so it'll get back again. But the habit reversal skill works for a lot of people just to get the control of that as well. Once you get control of that, that allows either the skin to heal or the hair to grow back as well. And if you can catch that, you'll get better and better at it, better and better at that catching the arm going up. No, it's coming up. I'm gonna put my hand down and just keep it wide for that, maintaining it for just over that minute if possible. You can even find you do that, then that becomes a new muscle memory, and therefore you can do that. Even people do it when in they're sleeping, or if they go to the loo in the middle of the night, they find themselves, they say, Simon, even in the middle of the night, someone must have told me subconsciously I was going to pick, but my hands automatically went out again. And I link the two behaviors, you link the two behaviors together, from this to doing the opposite. So that's the treatment in that sense as well. Right. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to see what's going on. Now that treatment, it may sound really straightforward, but it's not. It's really quite difficult to do, and it means that you've got to link it, and you need to be able to get the monitoring and do that. So somebody said that often when I pull, I'm aware I'm doing it. In this case, is what can help. Well, that's really good. So already you're halfway there. If you're aware when you do pull, What you need to do is catch yourself as soon as you go up to pull your hair and do that, is say, no, okay, this is when I now need to do the opposite movement. It's at this point I need to say, right, I'm going to put my hand down, across, and then flat, as far away from the face as possible. And I'm going to stay that. You should feel it in your hands here as well for about a minute. And then you record that, and then you go again. In the beginning, you'll find out that you're constantly doing it, but soon you'll be able to know that as soon as you go, you'll catch yourself earlier and earlier and earlier in that process, until just having the urge, you'll be putting your hands out like that. Okay, and hold on. So at the moment, I'm holding on, I'm gripping onto the computer, which would be that. That's what I would do if the urge was here to do that. Is doing the opposite movement, is staying with that, and then recording it. Okay, at that point, because you need to know, you can monitor the change in the way, the urge, and the strength of that urge as well. That's really important. But yes, anonymous person who said, when you're aware of doing it, but in these cases, what can help? It's the same thing. You're halfway there in that sense as well. But what you need to do is actually just go for those bits. Go for the opposite behavior. Another question: when I'm distressed and pull, psychiatrists call this self-harm. Can body-focused behaviors ever be classed as self-harm behavior? I'm aware it's an impulse control disorder, but if it's purposely done when stressed and the person feels that they may as well pull out of anger or hopelessness, is this self-harm? Okay, so I'm going to give my opinion, which is based on many years working in this field. The answer is generally no, it's not. It's so. And I know I've had this argument with a lot of analysts and who want to see it as a self-harm behavior. They're the same people who, if you say, they often think that alcoholism is self-harm. It could be argued that. Of course, they could argue that it's self-harm because it's we know that the person, there is aspects of it that people know that they can get that satisfaction, but it's very short-lived. The bit where you think, oh, that's it, okay, that's very short-lived, and people know that when they're doing it, that this is going to be difficult in the end, and I'm going to be really guilty about this, and I'm going to feel lots of shame about that, and I'm going to feel hopelessness even more so as well. So if the person feels they may as well pull out of anger or hopelessness, of course, what tends to happen when they do pull their hair is they feel even more hopeless and even more anger and even more loss of control about the situation. And then that just rattles on down. So I don't think it's helpful to label this as self-harm at all in that sense as well. And it's not really helpful to the person in that sense as well. I don't think it really is helpful or positive towards yourself. So I would say no. So I'm not going to take that as well. I've got an impulse control disorder that I know that it gets out of hand, and that's because I'm human and it's bound to happen sometimes. I know sometimes I eat too much, I get excited, or I drink too much, or I spend too much. At the moment, I've got a huge pile of cardboard out there. Because I haven't been going out, I've been buying lots. It's the way it is. It's absolutely okay. We shouldn't be. I don't think it's helpful to be saying it's as a self-harm behavior, and it kind of is denigrating, I think, the actual nature of it as a particular and repetitive piece of behavior that becomes ingrained in you. It becomes difficult. That's why they're often quite idiosyncratic. People have different types of picking, whether it's like, oh, I need short hairs, or it's curly ones, or particular ones, or particular parts, because of where that's happened and where that starts through as well. And then often slightly idiosyncratic things people do when they're touching their skin, whether it's like eating the hair or swallowing the scabs or whatever it is that happens. Those pieces of behaviors are all understandable as learnt behaviors, that in the same way as David Beckham constantly took, free kick after free kick after free kick to get that muscle memory. You've now got muscle memory on those things. It becomes your idiosyncratic way of coping, which is quite understandable. And I wouldn't want to call it self-harm behavior. I don't think it's helpful. Did I do that one? Okay. Thank you, Sarah, for saying, I know you had to leave early. I'm glad it was interesting. But thank you for that. I'm always worried it does. I seem to chat. I seem to ramble a lot and go off piste, and I think, oh, I'm not sure if it's useful or not. I'd never watch this on YouTube, by the way. I really wouldn't. But hopefully, 15 of you who have stayed are getting something out of it and finding it useful as well. That's basically what I wanted to say. That the basically it is increase your awareness, make it harder for yourself as well, and be compassionate and look for new habits and get a routine. That we know we're beginning to get slightly out of lockdown and do those things. So the routine is really important, to adapt the routine as you're able to do more and more things as well, and actually say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to manage that. But also, it's a really important that if you do go back and you pull again or you pick again, is to not beat yourself up about it. It's absolutely fine. It's okay. It's one step and one step at a time. You manage the next 5 minutes, and then the next 5 minutes, and then the next 5 minutes, and you'll find you will get more and more skill in that ways, and you will be able to manage with that. And yet, at some point, a life event will happen, or something difficult will be in your life, and then it's likely that will come back up again. And you say, okay, now I know what I need to do. I need to do the habit reversal again. I need to get support. Don't forget, if you are depressed or you do have anxiety disorders as well, then that's why I recommend getting the support, getting the mental health support. That's no shame in that at all. And we should be really open about that and getting that support. Whether that means for some people, CBT for depression or anxiety, or an antidepressant in that sense as well. But that's alongside the skin picking in that as well. So somebody has said, has given that what I call a dualism about skin picking, and they've really put that in the Q&A really beautifully, which is that this person hates their skin picking and wants to stop so badly and regain their life. And the other side, the behavior feels so pleasurable. It sometimes gives you a great sense of relief. But that is exactly what I was talking about, that we do that and then we get that sense of relief. But I also know that sense of relief doesn't last, does it? What happens is you then hate it and you think, oh God, I'm losing my life, and look at the way it's messed up my skin and what's happened as well. So then you become depressed and you give up and you get hopeless. And then you think, oh, this is really, really annoying. And then you feel I can't control. But also it's like a pleasure there for you to think, so you want to do it more as well. What I would suggest is this approach. This is the actual thing, to get the awareness straight away and to say, okay, habit reversal, I'm going to have to look for alternative pleasures, alternative things, and to give that up step by step, because it is something which you do need to give up, because of the way the pleasure and the life and all the things you want to do as well. Often it's so when you keep a diary about your skin picking, when you do that, you may want to have things that why you're doing it for. I knew somebody who, when they were doing their diary, they had a picture of their daughter there every time they were recording their skin picking, to why they were doing it, or a picture of them when they were slightly younger in a bikini, to say, this is what I want to be again. I want to be able to show my skin on the beach again. It's really important to have that trigger, just to pull us out a little bit of, yes, I know this is pleasurable and gives me a great sense of relief, but this isn't worth it in the longer term. I have to look for alternatives. But if you do relapse, not to beat yourself up about it and not to give yourself a hard time as well. That's really, really important as well. Okay. Somebody's asked, can antipsychotics ever help? Not for this, no. It's not a psychotic disorder. I would say not. No. There's no need to. Sometimes some antidepressants would help, definitely, if you are depressed and you have a real sense of hopelessness and feel that sometimes that life isn't worth living and what's the point, and you find that really, really hard to get out of, and you find that you're not interested in various things, and either you eat too much or eat too little and expecting your sleep, then antidepressants definitely can help. But I wouldn't necessarily say antipsychotics can help, no. Any other questions? I've rambled on for 15 minutes. That's more than enough. I think I've packed in over an hour's talking, because I talk 3 times the speed of most people. Sorry about that. You've got any chance of any questions you want to, and hopefully that's been helpful to people. Aha, somebody's gone as well. So somebody's has said that their main picking is connected to BDD. I pick at skin on the face to try and reduce and smooth the appearance of that. Yes, absolutely. For the makeup foundation, and then it makes the appearance worse. I'm not sure how to break the cycle. I've treated this is something that happens quite, to be honest, it happens quite a bit with BDD, with appearance of skin as well. Not just acne and smug, but rosacea, was it rosacea, where there's a redness in the skin as well for people with BDD. This would be one part of your BDD treatment as well. And so the cycle is difficult to break. You do need to use a whole range of techniques here that would be used in the BDD treatment, where it's actually looking at the thoughts that you have about those things, reducing the makeup and reducing those things and taking those risks as well in doing that, and knowing that you are going out not looking the appearances as you want it to. And it's a really difficult to break the cycle, and breaking the cycle will mean a lot of anxiety, and it will be slightly distressed in the beginning. I know as a cognitive behavior therapist, in doing this, my job has often been to help people face their anxieties in a compassionate way. But there's no doubt that that can make me feel like I'm a real sadist sometimes, because I see the person often cry or get really upset or feel that's it, and face the very, very thing that they've avoided and spent a whole load of their lives trying to avoid. I need them to face, and that's a really, really difficult thing. And especially because you come into this job to try and help people, and the way you help them is by making them cry or get upset or going through the anxiety. But I do know that if you do that, and I've experienced that myself, I've now treated over 1,500 people with OCD and hundreds of people with body dysmorphic disorder. I worked with David Veal in the 80s on this before when it was called dysmorphophobia. Is that if you do face that and you can go through that, you can get a life back, and you can live your life. I treated, she always comes to my mind of somebody I treated who had to go to a house to assess her in this tall block of flats, and she was 19 and she hadn't been out of the house for over a year and a half, except in the dead of night in a huge hat and black robes almost as well, and hadn't been seen. And I managed to convince her to come to the anxiety disorders residential unit and stay. And for the first 2 weeks, she was wearing constant sunglasses and a really big hat over her face. I never saw what she looked like for 2 weeks as well. And she was so scared of that. Through the treatment, she did really, really well. And now she is a dance teacher, which is unbelievable. I mean, I was completely stunned. She's a dance teacher. She's showing her body off all the time. She's wearing leotards. Her face is open. It's remarkable. And she was able to say, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put myself through this. I know it's going to be difficult, and I'm going to stay with the anxiety to do that. And she was able to be a dance teacher. And often she writes to me and say, I'm still dancing, Simon. I'm still doing that. And it's amazing that she's completely different. So everybody can improve. There's always hope. No matter how awful it feels, there definitely is always hope, and you can always do this. And for body focused repetitive behaviours too, I've had very similar stories of people who have been very, very severe, who have changed their lives. Unfortunately, between you and where you want to be is a whole lot of anxiety, a whole lot of work, of climbing, of constantly keep getting up again, getting knocked down and starting again, and doing that as well, because it's not as straightforward. But you can get there, and you can do it. And on that note, if there's no other questions, I'm going to stop. Oh, there's someone over here. I have a huge favour of being photographed. Definitely, it's got to be a brave, graded approach to doing that, of photography. Which SSRIs work best for body focused repetitive behaviours? That's a good question. My answer would be that it depends on you. We know that SSRIs work differently for different people. So what you tend to do is go for a fairly common one. And if it doesn't work, you then try another one. So it's not what's better for the, because SSRIs don't pick out body focused repetitive behaviours. It's about the person themselves and how they react and what they're allergic to and what their side effects are. So this is something that's really important with SSRIs and the medications, is that if one doesn't work and you've tried it for 12, 13 weeks and you've gone back to the psychiatrist, then it's okay. That's okay. Sometimes it may take the second or third one to say this one works for me, because there's newer ones now with much less side effects and much less effects on life, and it's really, really good. So don't look at it as what SSRIs are best for OCD or BDD or body focused repetitive behaviours. It's what SSRI is best for me, and therefore that approach will allow you to go through them and get the one that helps you the most. Is it ever worth doing the non-behaviour focused therapies for dealing with these things you're avoiding by using schema, psychodynamic, etc.? Oh, okay. I probably am opinionated on that, and I manage psychotherapies. I actually am trained as a DBT therapist as well. I've worked with people with EUPD, emotionally unstable personality disorder, who do self-harm. They self-harm and cut, and often cut or self-harm themselves in lots of ways as well. And it's really helpful for that. For this sort of behaviours, I think that you really do need the behavioural bit, because it's about the behaviour of what you're doing, the skin picking. Yes, it's helpful to understand the kind of some of the feelings behind that, whether that's schema or psychodynamic. One, it can take years. Two, it can be expensive. Three, it's very difficult to get on the National Health. And four, there's no evidence that, in fact, what you would still need to do, once you understand it, it doesn't stop. Just because you understand something doesn't stop you from actually doing that. We've talked about some of the, if you see some of the people's questions have been about there is that part of gratification, there is the part of the relief that happens, there is the part of the kind of pleasurable part of this as well, and that kind of sense of relief once you've done that. That's always what you're working towards, whether you're picking or skin that as well. I know this gives me a sense of relief. When I'm anxious, I know I'm doing it more. I was doing it a bit earlier, about 5 to 7, but I've stopped now as well. So I would say no. I have BDD and pull my eyelashes out, and it makes me more reliant on makeup and camouflage. Would I need to not cover this up to help BDD? At some point, yes. But what I would suggest, first of all, is to work on the reverse piece of behavior rather than going for your eyelashes. And if you're trying to do that, as soon as you'll start to hear, you're saying, no, I'm going to resist and allow my eyelashes to grow as well, and do that. That's really important. And ideally, at some point, you'll be brave enough to expose yourself to get to a stage where you don't cover that up. And that will help with the BDD, and realize that actually I can, and I'm a valid person no matter how I look as well. Can EMDR help trichotillomania if it started in response to trauma? Interesting question. I don't know. I think EMDR can help with PTSD, and it can help with trauma. If you have other PTSD symptoms as well, then it can help with that. What I think, and it may be in that case, that the trichotillomania, the hair pulling, is part of that process. So it could, if you also have other symptoms of trauma going on at the same time as well. But it's also very possible that you could manage the trichotillomania with the habit reversal and the awareness and all those things as well, and then still have issues about the trauma, which could then be helped by the AMDR. Does that make sense? So it's not an either or in some ways as well. You can manage that trichotillomania part of it, and then see if actually, if there's still issues around the trauma, then that needs to be focused on as well, if it's affecting your life. But that's something I'm going to do. You use ACT therapy? I don't use ACT therapy, but I know lots of people who do. And that's mainly because I've focused on certain issues and certain things as well. And ACT is a new thing, hasn't got the evidence base that a lot of the situations I use have the evidence base. I've seen it grow up with since the 80s, 90s, and got better as well. I think ACT is a really emerging therapy, and you can, and I think it's something to that some people may find really useful. But I suppose I know the evidence suggests is use what really works. Just because it's older and the evidence is there doesn't mean that we should dismiss it. It works. So that's really good. Okay. That's ACT. Yes, acceptance commitment therapy. Thank you. That's really good. Brilliant. Oh, somebody's watching from Chile. That's very exciting, isn't it, as well? So thank you from Chile. That's really good. You're not alone, and there is always hope. There really, really is. Okay. So I think that's it, isn't it then? It's 8 o'clock, it's gone 8. And I said I was going to stop 10 minutes ago and started chatting as well and doing that as well. Does DBT work? Yes, DBT definitely does work. That's dialectic behaviour therapy for the lots of evidence on it working for if it's suitable for you. So you have to go through a process to see if it's suitable for you as well. So for certain problems and issues, it can really, really help. Quite happy to answer any more. It's really good. That's okay. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, in that case, all 13 of you who have been amazing enough to stay on, thank you, or 14 of you, thank you. I'm going to finish there as well, unless anybody has any other last questions. No. Okay, thank you, Amanda, Amelia, Amy, Bernice, Charlotte, Kitty, Karina, Laura, Marie, Michael, Richard, Verena, Verity, and Vicky. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that as well.